Good afternoon. Now, please sit down, everybody.
Oh, let me mic you. Too many steps.
Oh, technical difficulties already.
It's not bleeding anymore. But I will cover it.
I believe this is my 35th year presenting. Would have been 36, but I got taken out one year with pneumonia. Possibly one of the first COVID victims, because it was that January of 2020. But I'm better now, as far as health goes. So I'm grateful to be here. I love this meeting. I love this profession. And I wanted to talk about some of my mentors. There are teachers and there are mentors. Teachers are a dime a dozen. That is, if you're smart. Dime a dozen is kind of a crappy expression in this case, because while the teachers are all around us, if we're smart, they are worth their weight in gold, not a dime. Some teach us what to do, some teach us what not to do. Most of you here have taught me things. Most, if not all, of my patients have taught me things. But mentors are special. They to you and you to them. I had 3 wonderful mentors during my optometric childhood. 2 were gone before I reached my optometric teens, and the 3rd one passed on since we last met here. And in that regard, I was asked by the family of that last mentor to tell this joke. Apparently, it's a family joke. Many of you may not, you've heard of the Canary Islands. Scientifically speaking, there are no canaries in the Canary Islands. You're probably also familiar with the Virgin Islands. And scientifically speaking, there are no canaries in the Virgin Islands either. So that, unlike the Wiener Squeeze, which I invented, the name of anyway, that is the Wiener family joke. I've always attempted to keep in mind that if I have seen farther than others, it's because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. I may not really have seen farther, but as many of you in here, I have certainly seen differently. I think you all know that. So I would like to pay tribute the first half of my paper to these first 3 mentors particularly. We lost Dr. Harold Wiener in the past year, and I'd like to spend some time talking about him first. I became an optometrist for a few reasons, and in chronological order, except I'm not really counting the first reason because that went unrecognized until much later after the other 3 reasons. So I was at a crossroads in my life. I've been playing the drums for about 10 years. I dropped out of college after the first year because I started out as a political science major, then switched to psychology, and then switched to undecided. So I could see a pattern, and I decided not to waste my parents' money at that point. And also it was required in that 3rd semester that I had to take biology. So that was done with that. And then, but when I went back up, I had found a book my aunt gave me about the Bates method. It wasn't Bates, it was Harry Benjamin. And I thought, what I've been going through all these years with my own experience with optometry, it was mostly with ophthalmology, but some optometrists as well. I said, I see there's different possibilities out there. And how would I find somebody who knew the standard approach and also knew these other approaches? And I thought in the time it would take me to find that person, and I think there was a light bulb over my head, literally. I said I could just do it myself. And apparently I did. So my other options were to work for my father, and so that also helped spur me in a different direction. So I did find, I didn't know vision therapy existed. I thought I wanted to create something like that. And then when I first walked into PCO, I saw this clinic that was called a pediatric clinic. And I wanted to get involved in that right away. So I was older than most of my classmates, and they were amazed that I rode a bike to school 7 miles each way, including one day in a hurricane when the school was closed. And I got there and it was empty. And they were also amazed that somebody so old could throw a frisbee around like they could. So I sought out the person who was in charge of this pediatric clinic, and I said, "How do I get involved in this like now? Because I'm old. I want to get going." So you can't, but he told me to take a hike. I mean, an elective, and he told me about this course that was taught by Wiener and Kraskin, and back then the first thing I thought of was the amazing Kreskin. Look it up, kids. So I took this course in my second year, but before that circus came to town, I saw another elective that looked interesting to me. That was taught by the person who would become my first optometric mentor, Dr. Martin Kane, who unfortunately passed away right after, well, during one of these meetings when he went home early to go ice skating with his son and grandson and had a freak skating, and he was a semi-professional skater. He had a freak accident and passed away. I ended up buying his practice because someone who I will not name, they were interviewing and they didn't really like his approach to optometry, and then called me, and I went to pick up to empty out his office. I went with my brother, who had had strabismus surgery when he was in his early teens. And we pulled up to the place, and he described the interior of the building to a T, because apparently he had been going there for vision therapy. So I was honored to be able to inherit Marty's practice. Ended up working with one of his grandchildren over the years, and he was a wonderful gentleman. He taught the course he taught. The elective was called Perception, Cognition, and Learning, and it was very interesting. And he dressed to the nines. The guy really knew how to present himself, something I obviously did not learn from him. But other things that were important, I did learn from him. So I signed up. You can see it was snowing heavily in the room that year. It was quite interesting. But is there a pointer on here?
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Your fingers.
that's Dr. Hal. That's Dr. Mark. That's Dr. Sidney Cohen, sitting right about where Henry and Wendy are there many years ago. So I signed up for the Wiener and Kraskin show. It's the first chance I got. And it was a 2-day course, and it required some dedication because it was a Saturday and Sunday. It was an incredible show. I ended up going to their show 4 times. I'm a slow learner, including 1 year after I graduated. So I was mostly hoping they would buy me lunch. And not only did I end up getting a number of free lunches, but I actually got paid handsomely for attending those lunches because I got to spend time with Hal and Bob, which was incredible, every minute of it. So as an aside, after my first time taking the course, which was my second year in optometry school, I was not allowed to get credit for it. So I went to the dean and said, I took the course, 2 days, weekend, I was here. He said, well, we don't feel that you had the knowledge base to gain anything out of that course. And I said, well, it's funny because I got a lot out of that course. And he said, well, hopefully you'll take other electives and you'll get credit for those. So, and I did not get credit for the time the ones I attended after I graduated. One of my favorite moments from that course was Hal discussing the black book, the 21-point analytical. And the first probe is ophthalmoscopy. And there was a resident in attendance, and the resident said, well, you can't see into the periphery without dilating the pupil, to which Hal responded, you can't see into the periphery without dilating the pupil. I've been doing pretty well for 40 some years. I like that. Then he took us into the lab and went through the 21-point analytical in about 12 minutes. You know, you would think it would take forever to go through that. Went through it like butter. It was unbelievable. So I subsequently was able to get an externship in the offices of Doctors Hal and Mark Weiner. Hal taught me the importance of peripheral awareness. That was a big thing for him. And also he would all of a sudden remember a training procedure that he had languished over the years and said, oh, let's do this. And he would just do it with everybody for like a week or two. And it was a very different perspective on what VT was than what I saw at PCO. And the first time I was in his satellite office, which was a much smaller office, his main office he had built for his practice. The therapy room had I think it was 20-foot ceilings, and it was a 40-foot square room with a trampoline, full-size 4x8 trampoline. And it was amazing. The kids would come in, they would go down a few steps, half a flight of steps. They would sign in what time they got there. They would go over to this rack of glasses, which I'll show you a picture of my version later on. And they would pick out their training lenses, whether they knew what it was, whether it was a +50, +75, +1. They would take out their training glasses, go to the chalkboard and do what I called the Wiener chalkboard sequence, which was, I'm not going to get into that, but it was just it was a wonderful environment. The first time I went to the satellite office, he said, look, I have an exam coming in. There's going to be about 5 kids coming in for therapy. Can you handle that? I said, know what I'm doing. They're your patients. You'll be fine. He said, do this with this kid, do that with that kid. I said, okay. So I thought that's how training went. So I have had, between 1 and 5 or 6 people in training at a time, quite frequently over the years, because I learned that you don't want to hold hands. You want to set them up and let them start, let them go. You can watch them. Many women have watched me in action and said, you're really good at multitasking for a man. And I took that as a great compliment. And one of my other favorite moments was I purposely I had to send reports back to the preceptor periodically to show what I was doing there. And the case I sent back was a young child that was a exophoria. It wasn't exotrope, but it was an exo, or we'll call it a CI for argument's sake. And Hal prescribed +50s for the kid. And the preceptor said, you can't prescribe +50s for an exo. I said, I didn't. You might want to take it up with Dr. Weiner, who's been doing it for 40 some years. So I knew that was going to happen, but I did it anyway. I have issues. So lastly, during my optometric childhood, there's Hal's book, which has been reissued. It's a very nice book. I was privileged to live a week of optometry with the 3-headed Kraskin being. That was also remarkable. Spending time with them was just an incredible gift. An incredible boost to my understanding of optometry and the visual process. Bob taught me the importance of plus lenses at near, along with a host of other concepts, notions, and ideas, particularly betting dollars to donuts, which served me well over the years. It was a wonderful mind-bending experience, really. So both Hal and Bob worked under the assumption that it wasn't the procedure that mattered, it was how the interaction unfolded. So at one point I asked Bob, what was the point of the Wallach rings? What's the purpose? He said, and it was kind of weird because he actually did not answer me with a question. He said, it's just another way of engaging a person through the visual process. And that's what it's all about. There's so many procedures out there. Almost an infinite number at this point. And it matters not. Jerry Getman always said all you needed was like a deck of cards and a patch and I forget what, but oh no, I think it was a piece of chicken, a piece of broccoli, and no, something else. I also Jeffrey already did this, but I'd like to give an honorable mention to Bob Sannett, who we recently lost. He was not one of my mentors, but someone like so many others at this gathering, who I had the good fortune to see and hear, and who provided inspiration during my early years, after seeing him lecture a few times, and clearly a mentor to very many optometrists out there. What am I up to? So this is something that I often tell if I run into students or new practitioners. First thing you want to do is probably get lens power in action and vision training in action, the OEP series. Just tremendous, a great start, if nothing else, to really get you a foundation on which to build what you're going to do. So we want to use lenses to provide opportunities for change and development. Lenses change the instructions and feedback to the brain, and they enable people to change their relationship to time and space, and therefore how they move and behave. Just as Kraskin talked about presenting options for treatment after the initial evaluation, VT is about providing conditions to engage the visual process consciously and otherwise. Lenses also provide similar opportunities. So I often tell patients that typical lenses are bossing them around to make them conform to the will of the lenses. For any lens to have an effect on somebody, the organism has to respond. It has to do something in response to the imposition of the lens between the environment outside and the internal environment. So I almost always alter the person's habitual prescription when they come to me with issues. So, and as I describe, and people have verified this because I don't really have that much experience going to optometrists these days. Most experiences are you walk in, you sit in front of an autorefractor, it takes some measurements, and then the machine tells the doctor what to think. And I don't need a machine to tell me what to think, and I barely even think at all, I just do. So ultimately, even if the person returns to their old prescription down the road, they're now in charge because they've learned more about their visual process, how they operate, and what they want and need. And they're all pretty much never going to wear that prescription full time the way they did when they came in. So to me, it seems that most prescriptions have more to do with the person prescribing them than the person wearing them. So here's Bob Kraskin in action. So now the key word is lenses. Lenses, lenses, lenses. I feel very strongly that we are blessed in this profession that our fundamental tools, that which is peculiar to optometry, has to do with the utilization of lenses. That is our hallmark, and I hope that we shall never forget it. To me, when we talk about visual training is the use of lenses. There is no other way to describe and discuss visual training without a consideration of lenses. So this is my version of what Hal had in his training room. As you go down the steps there, the first thing you see is a wall of lenses. So I use a lot of lenses in my therapy. So I'm just going to run through, we're going to move on to part 2 of today's presentation, Adventures in Lenses. So I often tell patients that I prescribe lenses not so much for seeing as for being. So here's the quote that has been reformatted many times in many ways, but this is right out of the book. Hopefully it is appreciated that a lens does nothing to a person. On the contrary, a person can do much with a lens, and that's what we're hoping. So Again, it's going to be a lot of, a lot of this because that's what a lot of people still latch onto in our colleagues. But you'll see there's more going on here. So I'm going to start with an oldie, but a goodie. I talked about Julie here before. Um, we don't have to go into detail on any of this. She, semi-pro tennis player, acupuncturist. When we met at that in 07, she was 45, blah, blah, blah. So you might want to jot down her original prescription that she walked in with. So not enough cylinder to really get excited about, unfortunately, but a lot of minus going on there. You can see the acuities with the lenses. For many years, I refused to examine anybody with their habitual lenses. I lightened up a bit over the years. So you can see some of the findings here. It's all in the notes. So here's a subjective with some different lenses. So here's what I prescribed, and this is somewhat uncommon. It's very uncommon because these are not symmetrical lenses. I try to do that whenever I can. It's not always feasible, but that's my initial hope. So here's a couple years later, acuity's coming around. She did a little bit of vision therapy. She did 3 sessions. She's very busy. But she was playing better tennis. She didn't wear any prescription to play outdoors. She felt that she did need something with, I guess, less lighting, less natural lighting indoors. Here's 2012. Let's get to the exciting part. So things are moving along. And here's this July, she came in, usually goes without lenses. Eye movements were now excellent. Stereo is still around 25. And most of the other findings, which were okay, were about the same. But now she's kind of seeing 20/20 without any lenses. So that's not really supposed to happen. But I like it. So you can't see, this is Pete, 70-year-old retailer, wholesaler. He is a deadhead. He and his wife, they were fun. They live in Maine. I met him through the buying sheepskin slippers off of his website. And then he Googled me, and he one day he called me up. He said, "Yeah, I was looking at your website." He said, "I want to talk to you." And he starts telling me, what's going on. He has a pretty severe exotropia, sorry. He can alternate and had a serious cataract in the left eye and seeing double. So now this is a little more interesting on the cylinder front. And he told them he wanted, with the cataract surgery, he did not want to change his prescription.
You go back.
More than that?
So you did nothing and he's better.
You just walk into my building and that's what happens. Seriously, I used to just like on a whim, check VAs after the exam was completed. And most of the time I did it, it was better than when they walked in. And the chart's not up there very long. They're not memorizing the chart. And when they do, they say, "Oh, well, I remember that line." I say, "What makes you think you got it right the first time?" So here's the proposed new RX. What happened to the cylinder? Is that a spherical equivalent? Somebody accused me of using spherical equivalents. I took that very poorly. I did not enjoy that because that requires math and thinking. So I don't do that. So yeah, there's the acuity. Just yanked the sill out, took out the old chainsaw, and who needs it? So he's been working on his own, just doing stuff. He came in like twice for therapy, once a year. Couples when they travel south, he stops in. Oh, wait, okay, so this is Scott. 70-year-old, now out of work, adult literacy instructor. The grant money dried up, that's a shame. His chief complaint,
Be your best friend.
yes, that was his chief complaint. He was also complaining of unsteady acuity at near, but. So he was a little nearsighted, a little presbyopic. Comes by that naturally or fairly. So he was very worried about his upcoming cataract consult because they told him it would be a 4-hour exam. And I said, that's crazy. I said, I'm guessing that 3 of those hours at least will be in the waiting room. So I called them up. I said, how long is your, initial cataract evaluation? Well, it's 4 hours. I said, 4, really? He said, well, how long is with the doctor? He said, well, I don't know. I'm just answering the phone. I said, okay, just was kind of curious. So he's kind of anxious in general, but he was not happy about it. So this is what he's been wearing. Probably a little nearsighted the whole time we've known each other, but he never had a prescription until he finally decided he wanted to, get examined by me in 2017. We put him in -150s, which he only wore to drive. He was what they call 20 happy. So, and then in 2021, so I guess the +50 is really a +2 for him, as an ad, because he was already pretty old. So yeah, he was anxious about this. He survived the cataract eval, but he almost did not survive the refraction. So he was given new prescriptions. He sends these to me. I said, it's crazy. I said, come on. No, it seemed better. I said, come in the office. That's what they came up with at the surgeon. Or that's what the autorefractor came up with, and the surgeon said, whatever. So,
Except it would have been in plus, someone.
Right.
well, I transformed.
Oh.
I transcribed it. Again, the math and the thinking, I was not happy about that. So, yeah, I may have rounded the axes. I don't know. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, there's no way. So he comes in and I put him in the chair and I strapped him down. And he said, no, it's a little better. I'm like, it's not that much better to me. I said, you gotta, if you want more lens power, you gotta buy that with letters. At least gotta give me some reason. So he said, no. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I said, because now it's an experiment. I said, if you were anybody else walking in here, I would not give you these lenses. I'm just telling you, there's no way I'm giving you this prescription based on what we came up with. But I'm going to do this because I'm now curious. I make him the glasses. I happened to go over to his house a couple weeks later. Said, so what do you think? He said, I don't know. So, well, I can't wear the reading ones at all. Really? That's surprising. He said, the other ones, I think they're okay. So he said, okay, come back in. We're going to double check again. Here's what we came up with. So he saw a little, again, he's using the distance glasses as needed. I can live with that. It ruined my entire reputation. I had to go into therapy after prescribing the cylinder. But the reading glasses are reasonable, and he's very happy with them. So it's like, whew, that was exciting. Okay, we're moving on to Matt. This is a fresh one here. 34-year-old on computer all day. He's a tech guy. First RX around age 9, no issues until 2024. There was nothing that kind of precipitated that he could relate. So we just moved on from where we were. I never played golf, but that's how I work. Play it where it lies. So his chief complaints, he was a little worse than my friend Scott, who just had me to deal with. He had headaches, acinopia, dizzy, diplopia, motion sick, nauseated, lightheaded. That was not fun. So at this point, the single vision RX was the least bad. He said the best relief was closing his left eye and that was better than closing his right. And then I think they put him in progressives. He said those worked for a while, but then they stopped working. And all the symptoms were exacerbated by close work. Yeah, there's the progressives. And by the time he got to me, the symptoms were worse with any prescription that he had. So here's his current RX. You know, seeing fine. Pneumatics rod at near, he's showing a hyper, a little exo, intermittent central suppression. There's his ranges with the prism bar. And then everything went blue. Oh no. So 2 weeks later, we dispensed a new RX. Again, you can see I am not completely unreasonable. We prescribed some of the, cut the cylinder in half, did all that. Still seeing 20/20 with both eyes. And we planning ahead, I said, this is where I would like to go. And eventually we did go there. Obviously, it wasn't that long ago. He cut back to therapy once a month after like 2 months, I think. So I'm not seeing him that much, but he's happy with the glasses. He's wearing the you know, equal minus spheres very happily for 90% of the time. So 4 days ago, I asked Matt, I said, you know, what percentage change would you say you've had in your symptoms? And he said, I felt like I lost my life before I came in here. Literally, that's a quote. And now the symptoms are about 5% of the time and 5% of the intensity of what they used to be. So again, most of that is lenses. I mean, there was a little bit of VT going on there, but lenses might be important. And I just thought of this because I just examined Kim last week. She's been coming to therapy for quite a while. She's a psychologist on the computer all day. It's mostly remote. It's all remote. It's been for a while. First RX in her early 30s. She bumps into things a lot. She says her husband doesn't allow her to measure things. So here's her RX coming in. Good Vidacil, the usual suspects, poor stereo, some suppression. This morning we were talking about stereo acuity. Was that?
Stereo volume.
So after retesting her this week, when I have her do the stereo acuity, it still sucks. No gross figures, minimal random stereo. And yet she's doing, I have a spirangle that I hang from the ceiling, and so you can get space behind it in front. She's nailing it with pretty significant amount of bass out, decent, good amount of bass in. And yet, pardon? Alternating intermittent suppression.
No, that's Gallop.
So she still has pretty horrible stereo acuity, but her stereo volume is a lot better than it was. I'll settle for that any day if I had to pick one. So I prescribed for her. She started VT, like I said, quite a while, a year or so ago. We went to the next, no, this is her. So in 23, we started. And that's her acuity OU was a lot better than I would think with that prescription. So that's already a red flag for me that, you know, what is that about? So, oh, did I skip something? Oh, so I prescribed the Plano with -1. We cut the cylinder in half. With that, you know, made them equal. She wasn't really wearing them much. She was only wearing them at the computer, which her working distance was actually closer to 3 feet. So she's not that stressed out as far as the distance goes. Oh, I was starting to think about the next chapter in Forest where he's talking about near stress. So hasn't been using the prescription much. The acuity's been kind of steady at around 20/30 OU. I think it's going to pick up because I just prescribed her plus 50s at near. She's not wearing the other thing anyway. And she looks like this is going to be better for her, even at the computer, but especially when she reads on her Kindle, which was a much more standard working distance for close. So I'm kind of certainly hoping and maybe even expecting her acuity to pick up once we cut back on the strain close up with a little bit of plus. Yes, all the symptoms are resolved, especially all the discomfort. She's not banging into things much. Apparently part of that was one of her dogs that kept stopping short in front of her. The dog was not brought in for therapy and subsequently passed away, unfortunately. That's mainly it. I have these, I'm just gonna, this is all in the handout or whatever, however that works now. That'll be online on the website. That's that what you kids call it? Thank you, Jeff. So just a few, and this, yeah, I'm not going to run through this. If you have any questions about how I do what I do, you can ask me and I'll try to tell you.
Go back.
You've heard all this before. I just didn't bother taking it out. So I know we're not really doing this now, but if you have any, I'll stop very briefly at each slide. If you have any questions, let me know. But there's a quote I always like: the optimal lens is not covariant with the refractive status of the eye, but is determined by the clinical understanding of the problem. And again, you know, I don't prescribe for acuity very often. I'm usually like prescribing for anti-acuity more than I am for acuity, but I do have a specialized population. I always should have a disclaimer that based on my inspiration from the Kraskins, I try to have mainly a referral practice. These days it's very different because people can self-refer, and a lot of them do after seeing my website because it has a lot of information that lets people know that they're getting into trouble. I mean, something different if they call me. Said that. So again, the value of the lens to the wearer is the change made in the output. True, there's a change in the input. However, this change brings about altered responses within the organism and also affects changes in the output. These output changes are the ones that lend significance to the use of lenses. I wish they would say that in the first day of optometry school. It could be helpful. It kind of lays it all right out there. Sorry, I wasted so much of your time. It's often helpful to think of a prescription as a means to an end and not an end unto itself. That's one of mine. Oh, you can't read the caption. It's no use. They keep rejecting them. I'm not sure who's talking here, but that doesn't happen in my office. So we have to remember that what we observe is not nature in itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. And we talked about that in the groups about, we may think we're looking at an aspect of the visual process. We may feel like we're trying to observe accommodation, but we're not. It's not separable. That would also be a helpful thing to say on day one of optometry school. So we have to remember that what we measure is not the visual process in itself, but the visual process exposed to our method of measuring. So my question for the groups is that, and if not, we have another question. Sorry, this should have said we. Why do we prescribe lenses? I don't know why I excluded myself because I'm happy to be one of you. And thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention to this matter. First slide,
The question.
the first question. Why is it that when you scratch an itch, the itch seems to move? It is the real question. I think it's a Zen koan myself, but not to be confused with a Barry koan. Before I go, I did forget, I always think I'm going to forget something, and I did. I spoke about my mentors that are gone, and I do have mentors that are still alive. Particularly, I will have to mention Greg Kishner because I have been very fortunate to have fallen in with a bunch of renegades led by him and Barry Cohen, the two of them particularly, and of course, Dr. Paul Harris has also meant quite a lot to me over the years. And if I'm presenting like a decent lecturer, a lot of that's thanks to him. Anything that's bad is my fault. Oh, I forgot my one other thing. It's a good thing that laughter is the best medicine because the way I practice optometry is a joke.
Any questions?
Nobody threw anything. That's good.
Well,
Not yet. Give it time.
I think let me stop the recording and turn